listening to the Straight to Video podcast with Rob Lane.
What is up, and welcome to the Straight to Video podcast. Alright, if you're a regular listener, then today's episode is a little left turn and a bit of a departure to our, let's say, regular schedule broadcasting, because today I'm checking in with my longtime friend, which I figured out will be 30 years next year since we met, a fine fellow who goes by the name of CoffeeJezus. When we first met back in the 90s, he had the moniker Luna, so right from the get-go, I knew I was colliding with a one-of-a-kind guy. Thursday nights would turn into hangout nights, either chatting about music and films, which would eventually grow into writing songs. He would have a massive effect on many things that would become near and dear to me over the years, and whilst we bonded over the band Hardline, through his sheer passion and enthusiasm, I would be sent down music rabbit holes and become fans of countless alternative rock bands and obscure AOR acts, probably even before I'd heard them. That was how passionate and detailed his descriptions were. We would eventually go on and form one of our very first bands together, but as most things do with those first bands, you split up and we would drift apart, as was the case towards the end of the 1990s. We'd occasionally see each other at gigs, but unfortunately time and life gets in the way, so it wasn't until the past few weeks we would sit down and have a proper catch-up. A lot has changed and a lot has stayed exactly the same. What you're essentially going to hear is two friends reminiscing, digging out some old memories, and also catching up on new music, and even discussing the importance of acknowledging the seriousness of mental health. I think and hope you'll enjoy it. Before we dive in with CoffeeJezus, let's talk more coffee and remind you my friends Dead Skull Coffee are offering you, the listener, 15% off their fine rock and roll ground or full bean coffee. Simply head on over to deadskullcoffee.co.uk and drop the discount code STV on checkout. If you want to connect with my friend CoffeeJezus, you can find him on Twitter at CoffeeJezus. That's Jesus spelled Jezus, or Jezus for the American listeners. And check out his new electronic music project, There Is No New Information, described as horror pop for replicants, on Twitter and Instagram at No New Info Music. Right now, though, let me introduce you to my friend of almost 30 years, CoffeeJezus.
Congratulations on the numbers. Once again, congratulations on the numbers. Your aesthetic is aesthetic. Eye-pleasing eye. Smiled when you said what you did. In the meeting, what are you doing? At the weekend, the others and I were thinking of taking up clay pigeon shooting. Oh, and one more thing. What was it? Jokes. Did I mention the numbers? Did I mention the numbers? Again.
How we doing?
I'm doing alright. How about you?
I'm alright, huh? I'm all good.
You haven't aged a day. How dare you?
I had a shave just for you.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Is that because I'm just rocking like an almighty beard at the minute?
Oh yeah, oh nice.
Yeah, it was funny because I've got sort of quite a twirly moustache on the beard, and I was joking that it will mean that people will leave me alone when I go out on walks and listen to music, because I'll have this mysterious air of I could tie you to the train tracks and wait for a train.
So how's things? You're good?
Not so bad. It's going to be good to catch up, because it's been like 5,800 years.
Something like that.
Yeah, it feels very much like we're 16 again.
Oh shit.
Because I'm like looking at you, I'm like, oh man, it's been a while.
Are you still in Derby?
Yeah, I'm still sort of near the centre and stuff.
How is Derby now?
It's not really spectacular.
No? Oh, it seems to be changing.
Does it? I don't know. It's the centre always feels like it's getting less and less shops, and I miss places like Leeds. You can go to Leeds and there's no, or at least the last time I went, there was no dominant shopping centre. You know, you could walk around the streets and lanes. There's still sort of a lot of secrets there. And Manchester manages to do both. You know, when we went to Night and Day to see Butch Walker and stuff, around there in the Northern Quarter, you've got all the cool record shops. You've got that fashion shop that has like 70s egg chairs and things in it. And then you turn the corner, you've got the Northern Quarter itself, which was used in Captain America. You know the bit in Captain America where shirtless Chris Evans sort of leaves the test chamber and runs down the street That's the Northern Quarter, and they redressed it twice. And I saw the start of that with more workers than you've ever seen in your life, because it looks more like late 30s Manhattan than Manhattan does. And so, yeah, Manchester's still got those cool secrets and like Affleck's Palace and stuff. And the irony is that after that to redress chase down the Northern Quarter, the place that the spy disappears to in the submarine is the place where they used to film This Morning.
That's nuts. Because I know they do a lot of stuff in Glasgow, don't they? They've done like the latest Indiana Jones up there.
I know the new Batman's been done up there. It's kind of doubling for Gotham sort of quite a lot. And the scene with the vehicle sort of crashing in and, you know, the Riddler delivering his sermon to Batman, I think that's in Glasgow as well. So it's yeah. So there's lots of stuff that can fizz in there. And, you know, one thing that we share is a love of practical effects. And I'd always rather see practical stuff than CG. The ideal is obviously the things that you super can't do. You either think out of the box or you sort of tip in a bit, but I'm not sort of super keen on CG stuff. I grew up on Harryhausen, for crying out loud. You know, seeing Harryhausen stuff now, you realize that there's so much of the man and his heart within the movements and the way things sort of react and feel, that it's very rare that you feel that in CG. But, you know, if we're also going back to that time, like the thing that I don't understand about like modern day cinema is that, like, I got into Italian Westerns a few years ago, and there was a great documentary on the Arrow video. I think it was the Ringo films that were on there. And the guy was saying that because in the rest of the world, the uptake in color TV use was far higher than in Italy and in Asia, in like Hong Kong, Japan, stuff like that. In Italy and in East Asia, they saw going out to the cinema as a weekly event. So you got all the copycat films, but a lot of those ended up pulling Hollywood stars over and ended up going back to Hollywood and doing their own stuff like Leone. And within those, there was some really, really cool things that were happening with regards to how the movies that they made often became B movies over here. And when you used to get B movies at the cinema. And the thing that I don't understand is that when I found out that filmmakers used to factor in for an interval.
That was actually a thing. They'd actually consider that when they're making the film.
They factor in for a cliffhanger so that people could either go to the loo and, you know, the moments where you saw the person come out with their little trays of like wafer ice creams and slabs of ice cream in there and like the pops and stuff. But they factor in for that. You know, there was always a queue for people getting food, but also you could nip to the loo or you could chat about what just happened like halfway. But I don't know how an 8-year-old sits through 3.5 hours of Infinity War.
Jeez, man. I don't think they do, to be honest. That must be like a hell screening.
I don't know, but I spoke to a friend who worked at a cinema and he was saying, oh yeah, they're just trying to pack in as many films as they can within a day. But surely they make most of the money on the popcorn and the sweets and all that kind of stuff as well. So I don't know. It seemed a strange one when I found that out.
We went to see Spider-Man over Christmas, and now they have so many adverts before. I think if the film starts at 3:00, you could probably rock up at 3:35 and still not miss it. There was a kid across from me. It was the sweetest thing I've heard in the cinema for years. So many adverts on, and in between one of the adverts, just heard this little voice, "Come on, Spider-Man." It was amazing. Me and Jane just looked at each other like, oh, that's like so heartwarming. Come on, Spider-Man. It had enough already.
Do you remember that if you did go and see like an A and B picture combo, do you remember which was the best one that you saw?
An A and B? What do you mean? Like
yeah, as in like you know when you had your main film, but you also would have like a secondary film that would show before it.
Oh no, I don't think I ever did that, to be honest. Every now and again you'd get like cartoons before a film, but I don't remember like a double bill.
There were often sort of, you know, British pictures that would go on, or they'd be dubbed into English, sort of Italian westerns and things like that, I found out. But the best one I ever saw, and this was like a rainy winter's day in Ripley when there used to be a cinema up there, right? The greatest double bill that I've ever seen. It started with The Secret of Nim, followed by Xanadu.
That's kind of a weird combination, really.
Well, there was a lot of children's films back then where, how can we terrorize children? And Secret of Nim, even though I haven't seen it probably since then, when I've looked at it online and stuff, people have gone like, oh yeah, it's really dark sort of subject matter.
That's a film I'd like to revisit, to be honest. I remember it being such a big deal back in the day, and I had the novelization of it. And was it like an offshoot of Disney, like people who used to work at Disney made Secret of Nim?
It was a guy who used to work for Disney, and I don't know if he just wanted to do something darker and weirder or just something with a lot more depth, but you got a lot of aspects of that at Disney, like Return to Oz. it seems like such a strange thing to look back on. I think Tim Burton was doing Black Cauldron at that point as well. And so I don't know if maybe the advent of Sullivan Bluth made Disney try and do a rethink, think like, oh, well, if they're going to try and steal our thunder, we'll steal those back. But none of those films were really a critical success other than Secret of NIMH, I guess.
I knew we'd gone off on a tangent straight away, but that's fine. I want to try and rein this in a little bit. I want to see how much you remember about the night we met. Sounds like a bit of a romance.
It does.
I'm pretty sure it was November 1993, and it might even have been your birthday.
Okay.
It must have been 93, because I don't think I was driving, and you met me off the bus in Eastwood.
Oh, I don't remember. I don't remember that.
Yeah.
I remember being in Rock City and turning to you after either a Taiketo or a White Lion gig and just going, I want to start a band. And I also remember an aspect of that, which I remember as being in Rock World in Birmingham, and Damn Yankees was on, and I'm sure I said something to you at that point as well. But that's all I remember. I don't remember you meeting me in Eastwood. I've still got a bag of the cassettes.
Oh, I've got bunches of stuff, mate. Bunches of stuff.
Yeah.
Because we'd been put in touch by a mutual friend at the time and Hardline fan, Joe Franklin.
Oh, I remember Joe. Yeah, Joe was really cool.
Yeah, that's how we got in touch. Because I was pen pals with Joe. I don't know if you was as well. I must have been.
I think eventually, yeah, because I went up to see Joe, I'm sure, like Taiketo gigs, and what was Mike Tramp's other band after White Lion?
Oh, Freak of Nature.
Freak of Nature, yeah. I used to go and see a lot of Freak of Nature stuff.
Yeah, I think Joe must have like pieced together that we live near each other and said, oh, you need to get in touch with this guy. So how we got in touch, I don't know. Whether we passed telephone numbers over letters originally, I have no idea.
I remember having letters or being in the pen pal section of Raw magazine at that point and sort of meeting like a few people through that, because it's absolutely fine to put your address in a national magazine. I don't know, but yeah, it's...
I didn't think of that. That's nuts.
Yeah, because it could also have been that. You know, if anybody sounded like vaguely cool, I'd end up, you know, it's the precursor to like MySpace in that regard, that, you know, I've got friends to this day that I met on MySpace, because rather than it being as saccharine as Facebook, it would just be like, oh, these are the films that I like. This is the music I like. This is what I do. This is how I learned HTML to get them up and running. Please forgive me. My page takes 5 minutes to load.
To load all the stars and all that kind of shit, yeah.
All the glitter, yeah. But yeah, I don't remember the specific.
I'm pretty sure Joe put us in touch and you met me off the bus and we hung out in your bedroom. Again, sounds like a romance, which was just like mine, posters literally everywhere. You couldn't see the walls. Your
bedroom was probably more posters than mine because your bedroom was bigger.
This is the same bedroom.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Man, I've still got pictures of, like, I romanced not long ago, probably about a year ago, when I was looking at like tech and how much I missed the 4-track, the Tascam 4-track.
The little Tascam. I don't know what happened to mine, because you and Jay had one and I brought the same one. I must have sold it to somebody. But those things were brilliant.
I got so into mixing with that stuff as well, like putting stuff onto one cassette. I'm sure we ran between machines at a certain point. We were essentially doing like a George Martin, like Beatles thing.
Exactly, like bouncing tracks and stuff.
And like sort of pulling them down. You know, I used to obsess over like the mixers and stuff. You know, I used to obsess over those. And then I got into the point where I started painting the songs and then attaching lyrics onto the paintings and just put them on my wall. And oftentimes things that came out that seemed very subconscious, I'd kind of figure out like 6 months later after waking up and staring at these lyrics, and I go, oh, that's what that was about. You know, in the same sort of way as you can be in a pub quiz and somebody will go, which singer in the 80s had a hit with Criticize? And you'd be like, oh, I know this. And then like 2 weeks later, you'd be sitting in the bath at like 6 in the morning. You'd be like, Alexander O'Neill, why have I just said that? Oh, it was the pub quiz.
I was immediately blown away by your sheer knowledge of music and your amazing Johnny Gioeli hair.
I did have the super longest naturalist, I don't know, the most like curly hair. And I remember going down to London on the bus, and I think I was kipping in the spare room at Dave Ling's house. And like Dave Ling had more vinyl than I've ever seen. Literally, like his hallway was half the size of his hallway because of the racks of vinyl going on. But yeah, I think I was on the bus to stay with Dave Ling, and I was biting off my split ends. And like there was a lass sitting next to me. She was like, "Never thought I'd see a guy like sorting his split ends like that."
Mate, I forgot all about that. I used to do that.
And I said, like, oh, I'm really sorry. She was like, no, I feel validated. But yeah, Dave Ling was a doozy in that regard, because he introduced me to the Paul Laney album, which wasn't available at that point. But the best one ever was when I went down to London and I was obsessing about Strength in Numbers by Tyketto coming out. And 2 weeks before the album was due out from Geffen, they got dropped. And Dave Ling, when we met up at this other gig, it might have even been like a Freak of Nature or something like that. He'd got this vinyl record, and he slid this cassette out of the vinyl record. And I was like, no. And he was like, yeah, I've done your copy. And literally, I got back to Nottingham, and it was like way early in the morning. And, you know, I loved Tyketto with everything within me. And I got back into my bedroom, the sun was rising, and I put the album on, and I just sat there, barely breathing, because even listening to my own breath would interfere with the music. And I just sat there with this cassette of an album that wasn't coming out and just cried my eyes out. I felt like Indiana Jones, but music, because I got this thing.
What was it about Tyketto you liked? Because like Danny Vaughan was like a massive influence on you. What was it about him and that band in particular, do you think, over all the other singers?
He had like such vivacity and like so much personality on stage. And there was an incident after that when they signed with Music for Nations, and I sent a fax down to Music for Nations, and Danny quoted it on Raw Power, which was shown like way early in the morning. And I was like, that's like the thing that I sent down. And it was starting off the tour in Nottingham, and I queued up outside Way Ahead Records, and I went in, and I'd literally taken my wall with me.
I remember that. You got so much shit signed.
I did.
Little cutouts with like Danny Vaughan's signature scrawled on it.
I went in, and Danny just went like, this is amazing. I'll sign all of it, but do you mind waiting until we've gotten through everybody else? So I was literally just waiting off to the side, chatting with him and stuff. And he got a Ghost Rider t-shirt on. So I was asking about like comics and things. And he went, what are you doing after this? I was like, oh, just going to mosey around and wait to the gig. And he was like, do you want to come back to Rock City? I was like, what? And so we sat there and we'd sort of chat with him. And then they did the rehearsal, and they were doing like even like soul cover versions and stuff, and like stuff I've never heard them do elsewhere. At least a few of those might have turned up later on, like the Doobie Brothers covers and things like that.
Yeah, they used to do Drift Away, didn't they? I remember seeing them do that at Bradford, all the harmonies and all that kind of things. Like,
yeah. And they did like Without Love, that one. They do Without Love. And yeah, they were just lovely. And then they were like, right, we're going to get ready now. So we'll see you at the gig. And then afterwards, Danny just went like, are you coming to any of the other gigs? And I was like, well, I'm going to Bradford in a few days. I was staying with Joe, but the rest I don't know. He's like, whatever you can get to, you guest listed.
Superb, man.
And that was the first point where, for a band that I loved, for them to treat me like I was the most important person in the world, that was a lesson not only to me within a burgeoning love of music and of wanting to do this, but it was almost like a fatherly lesson of how to treat people. And, you know, not to, however highfalutin you might feel or however high you might reach, to not lose that level of grounded. And that was, I think, later on when we met Butch Walker, like he was no ego whatsoever, super down to earth. And we thought we got that little stretch of time. And he was like, oh, we've got to go upstairs now. And we were like, oh yeah, okay, bye. He was like, do you want to carry on upstairs? And we just carried on the conversation. But again, that was the lessons I learned. And also, do you remember at that gig, we were waiting to go in and you were like, I've got a spare ticket. There were a couple of lasses that were looking over and smiling, including dark-haired lass. He was like looking away and I was like, those lot looking, I'm going to try and flog them the ticket. Do you know who that dark-haired lass was? It was Tina from S Club 7.
How'd you figure that out?
The face was in my head and I was like, oh my God, because she was there and a couple of lads from Busted turned up.
Yeah, I remember James Bourne was there. I saw him at the end of the gig, yeah.
But yeah, that was another lesson with sort of a love of music and a passion for it and a grounding for it. But given some of the bad things that you hear about music, often in the way that people treat people, I feel really lucky that I had people like that who were just courteous and like lovely and stuff.
It makes such an impression at that age as well. I mean, we'd have been like early 20s sort of thing, and you're still finding your way and you idolize these people, and to meet them and have them, like you say, connect with you and just share some time, which you never expect prior to that. It's such a big deal.
I think because there was no social media, obviously, back then and stuff, there was probably like more mystery and more allure surrounding these bands, and for American bands as well. We were buying all the American magazines from that little place in the subway underneath Nottingham,
which is long gone.
Yeah. One woman who used to be behind like most of them. Was it named like Jerry or something like that?
Oh, Jerry Miller from Metal Edge, yeah.
And so that obviously like took up lots of space on the wall and stuff. But once heard something with regards to, it might have been in Mark Radcliffe's first book, referring to music that would turn up in the NME and stuff. And he says that journalists back then weren't just reciting other quotes. They weren't reciting sort of press releases. They were trying to explain within their own poetry, the poetry of bands that you might never get to see and you may never get to buy their records. And that's really stayed with me. We both love, what's that Cameron Crowe film? Can't think of it.
Almost Famous.
Yeah, we both love Almost Famous. And it seems almost like you could staple that quote onto that as well. But yeah, that majesty and mysticism around music, and listening to an album over and over, and even like vinyl, choose your 9 or 10 best songs, how they fit together, how they go onto two sides, how you treat those sides as to whether you want a poppy side, sort of some sort of opus on the second, even down to sliding the record out the sleeve and then out the tissue paper and the as it goes on, like the center spool, the crackle as you pop the needle down. But also, given that was the Walkman generation, and I walked everywhere with that.
You did, yeah. You were a big Walkman guy. I recall that.
Big time. But even, the noise where, I'll do an impression of it. It's like and it's the point where the clear tape
just
hit the ferro. Then there'd be like and then your album would start.
You've got to be the first person ever to describe that. Everyone describes the needle going onto a vinyl. You have to be the very first person to describe the sound of the tape kicking in.
I put them down as like the foreplay of life. I will refer you also to like Kit Kats. You slid off the paper wrapper, then you smoothed your fingertip across so the logo came up on the tinfoil, and you slid a nail down between like the third and fourth finger, or first and second, if you will, and then as you snapped it off. That was amazing. I would take that every day over a sterile plastic package that can survive for 2 weeks longer.
Smooth the foil so you see the logo.
Well, you did. Of course you did. Otherwise, you're not human. You could be arrested back then. It was part of the appreciation.
What was your first record that you bought?
Ever? Uptown Girl by Billy Joel.
Right?
Yeah. I had an uncle up in Manchester.
Because you're from Manchester originally. I was thinking back.
My mum's from Manchester, and my dad was from Nottingham. So I used to spend like every now and again sort of up in Manchester. And when my folks split up, I spent more and more time up there. One of my uncles was a big music guy. So whenever we go as a family there, we'd take up at the very least a 12-pack of tapes and record everything that he got. In a room in my nan's house, he just had like this amazing stacker system. These headphones, which must have been like A, expensive, B, far too big for my childish head, and would make me look like the worst Princess Leia cosplayer you've ever seen. I used to sit in there and like listen to like loads of music and explore vinyl covers and stuff. And, he also had like in television and things like that. So he was like this mystical, magical uncle. It's like, oh, this is what being an adult's about, is it? This is cool. I used to go and see Manchester United with that uncle. I used to go and see Manchester City with my Uncle Peter. And I think that the only reason I became a City fan was because my Uncle Peter bought me a pie at halftime.
That's sealed.
That thing is like, it was a meat and potato pie, but in the very loosest of terms, because there must have been so little meat and potato in it. But on a cold November halftime, when you bit into it, the steam that came off it, the meat and potato steam, it was magnificent. You'd be trying to catch as much of it in your nostrils as you could, because it felt like you were consuming it in many ways. But yeah, he introduced me to like all manner of stuff. As a kid, you sort of hoover up as much as possible. But I think that was the first one that I bought with my own money and stuff. And I had no appreciation of what Joel was doing at that point. But it's interesting to remember some of the nuances and how I processed them as a kid. Like Jackson Browne sort of said that if I wrote a song that said, "There's nothing wrong with the world, there's nothing wrong with my heart," I would expect you to know that there is definitely something wrong with my heart, because there is so much wrong in the world. But somebody from another country who might not have English as their as their natural language might think like, got a strong heart and the world is a wonderful place. But he was also the guy who said that I don't just think of them as a record, I think of them as a record of events. I was like, oh, that's super wise. I like that.
When did hard rock come into play for you?
I bought the cassette of 1987 by Whitesnake and my dad hated it. We had 2 rooms. We had like the living room and the front room, and the front room was the good room. This is going to refer back again to the foreplay of life, but we had like a one of those all-in-one stacker systems in there. Often I'd go in that room to listen to music in the dark, just so I could watch the graphic equalizers go up and down. And it had one of those smoked glass doors that if you brought it to a natural conclusion, it went ding. Then you push on it and it'd go, and it would lock into place. And I remember getting that album and just putting it on in the front room. And I don't think my folks were impressed. The album that followed, I still really liked, but I was listening to loads of other stuff as well. I was listening to Eurythmics and a lot of electronica I'd really loved. I was super into like Go West and Wham.
Go West are that band, which I'm friends with so many people who quote Go West as being, I loved Go West.
Like the first album still super stands up as a piece of wondrous minimalism, like electronic minimalism. And I don't think they get their dues. They deserve their flowers for that first album. But the second album blew my mind. But also there was a thing when I was a little kid where I wanted my hair cut like Peter Cox, and I had a strop like later on this night. And my mum was like, what's wrong? I was like, no, I've done it right. She was like, what do you mean? And I was pointing out like at the front bits and the bits where his hair was receding. I thought it was part of the style.
Mate, I remember that you telling me that story way, way back. That's actually always stuck with me, that one. That's crazy.
Like I say, that was probably like early teens, and then Go West and Wham were there. But like even going to college, there was like Don Henley I used to listen to as well.
Where'd you go to college?
Mansfield, twinned with hell.
What did you study?
I was doing sort of catch-up stuff, but mainly it was like an art and design. And my most memorable aspect of being there was the greatest teacher that I have ever had, who was the psychology teacher. Like brilliant in lessons and stuff, and but it came to the exam sort of revision, and he got a load of revision questions, and he made a jigsaw of a famous face, and on the back of these pieces were quotes from like Freud and things like that, and on the other side was a famous face. So he'd ask all of these questions and then sort of turn it over. So all these questions on Freud, and then he turned it over, and it was like Bruce Forsyth. He then turned the pieces back over, and he'd do the worst impression of Bruce Forsyth as Sigmund Freud. He'd be like, oh, I'm in love, ooh, you fancy mother, and all that kind of. It was just, and we were all absolutely blathering ourselves in this revision. And when it came to the exams, you could see everybody in our group sat down, looked at a Freud question, thought of that point, thought of all of the answers, thought of the world's worst Bruce Forsyth impression. And away we went. And it's like, oh, that was genius. Absolute genius. Like super thinking outside of the box.
Well, that's that kind of that theory of remembering stuff, isn't it? Like pretend that you're on a journey, one thing links to the other. It's that similar kind of theory as that.
He didn't preface this with kind of, oh, this is the way that you remember it in the exams and stuff. It was just, there was no degree of pomp to the guy at all. I just think maybe he liked the thought that we'd sit in those exams and like one thing would pop into the other, and like almost like the surprise would inflate the bubble sort of past bursting point. But he was incredible. He was really, really cool.
One of the things which blew me away about you was like you're really on the pulse with new bands and breaking news. I mean, this was like way before the internet. Where was you learning all this stuff? I mean, like you say though, you went down to London to meet up with Dave Ling, and I think, did you know Dave Reynolds as well?
Did know Dave, yeah. Dave was really cool. And Dave was like a bit of a pioneer back then, because when he was working at Kerrang, there'd be the lists of what I'm listening to. And Dave would put like Spice Girls bootleg or something like that at number one, and people would go like, oh, Dave's taking the piss. And we're like, no, he seriously did love the Spice Girls and sort of chased down like bootlegs, and he did love music. But I don't know, with a degree of bluster, I think I rang up Dave Ling and just started talking to him to the degree where he was, you know, quite liked our conversations and stuff. And Reynolds, I think I saw in Rock City and just started saying hi to him and stuff. Again, like being surrounded by people who should seem untouchable, but they just loved what they were doing. They loved inviting other people into that. It wasn't like, I know everything and you'll never know as much as me. And I've always hated that sheen of plastic, whatever it's on. But these people who were just kind enough to invite you in, to excited to share stuff with you, and were really good at what they did, but didn't have an ego about it. But yeah, I think that's how I got talking to lots of folks like that. And I don't know, maybe the passion that I had sort of came across as genuine, but I'm grateful for these people not pushing me away, because I don't know. I don't know if my connection with music would have been as strong as it was, or, within sort of 3 different swathes of wanting to make it.
Because you were the first to let me know that Ted Poley had left Danger, replaced by Paul Lane, way before that news broke anywhere.
I might have heard that from Joe, though. Again, everybody talked to everybody at the gigs. You made so many friends. It was like a massive reunion whenever we went to a gig, because we'd see all these people again. I think the bands were really happy to not like, oh, we're building up our fan base. It was just like, these are good people. They're getting on with good people. I don't know. You just got this real sense of warmth and nothing commercial from it. Just something that was genuine, that people were listening to the music, had connected with their music. They seem to be decent people. Those people are getting on and looking forward to seeing each other and stuff. And that's a gift. That's really gorgeous.
It's where did you track down a copy of Cockroach by Danger with both versions?
Right.
Because that was years before that came out.
Yeah, it was. I've still got that tape as well. And it's still belting. And I will still go on record and say that the Poley version is the best version of it, just simply because his voice is such a pop voice.
He's got a voice like no other singer.
Whilst Laney was doing a really good sort of Seb back and was quite sort of growly with it, Ted Poley's was a pop voice singing the top, way above guitars that had gone really down tuned. And yet he just soared. But it was a really, I don't know, I've never really thought of it in this regard, but it was a really strange combination. And that's what I loved. The company who put out the Freak of Nature album over here, there was a guy who ran that. I was working in my first job at that point. I was working at a law firm, and we go and clear the floors and stuff of any of the stuff that needed to go back down. If I found a part of that office that was deserted, I'd ring people up. And I'd ring this guy up, and people would be going oh, where have you been? I had delivery to do. And I came back and, I put my tray down and stuff. And, within that regard, I went on deliveries and went to enough signings and all this kind of stuff. And proper music was the guiding light. But I'd ring this guy up, and he was the guy who, he would talk to me about loads of stuff. He sent me the cassette with the Danger albums on. He also sent me Way of the World, the Tommy Shaw album, which you just could not get. Sent me a copy of that on cassette, and would send me other bits, and was just again a super down-to-earth guy who was more knowledgeable than I was about music, but liked to talk, and was
to share stuff with people with a similar passion. Yeah.
But again, it's I'd not really thought of that for a while, but it's again, I'm super lucky that people in those kind of positions would just be all right. And if you ring them up, be I managed to get a copy of those Danger albums, both of them. What? Do you want a copy? Yeah, it's it's tape from a cassette, it doesn't matter. Send it over.
Yeah, because I remember when you told me you had it and you said, I'm going to bring it over, you can borrow it to copy it. I went out and brought the most expensive blank cassette I could find because I wanted a decent copy of it.
The same price as a 12-pack normally.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah. And instead of being see-through, it got that really deep flush grey.
Yes.
You're extra careful with the cassette stickers and the way that you wrote on it. You didn't want to smudge the name of the album.
100%.
Yeah. But yeah, I was lucky enough to chat with those folks and them not fob me off, which was cool. And even before the music stuff, I used to do that with video game journalists as well when I was a kid.
Really?
Yeah, I used to ring up people like Julian Rignall and stuff, and he super nice to me, really nice.
Did you go down the computer route, with Commodores or Spectrums?
Yeah, I was a Commodore kid. In fact, the first division that I had with my dad over music was the Commodore, the SID chip. It was essentially a high-end synthesizer chip inside a computer. And you got all these guys that I realized much later in life were not only composing music, but they were then coding what they'd composed. And it's only a number of years later I found out that one musician that I really, really loved was 15 when he was doing these compositions. He had to ask his mum to go to London to have meetings and stuff. But I'd never heard anything like it. And I super clicked onto it. These were my Beatles. My parents didn't understand them, but I super obsessed on that. That was one of my first massive obsessions with music was that, and buying games because of the musician.
Really?
Yeah. People can complain nowadays because they have to wait like 30 seconds for loading, but Commodore always used to have sort of loading music and stuff. So you get your first like beep, 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 and then you get like this music would kick in and you get your loading screen and stuff. And even as games became more complicated and say it was loading like level 2, you'd still get a new piece of music on there. Following that further down the rabbit hole as I did then, there was a point where a musician at Ocean Software, I think it was Martin Galway, who was the first person to figure out how to get sampled drums into things. And that then went on to people like sampling guitars and stuff. And it was like a huge evolution. That was a huge thing for me. That probably led into, me liking like the Go West and stuff. And it's quite nice to, ironically, sort of come back to electronica again recently. So it's a weird one.
You've been so like open to so many different styles. That's probably one of the things you taught me when we met, because when you're at that age, like late teens or early 20s, like fully into music, you're into the music you love, whether it be metal, hard rock and stuff. But you taught me it was okay to listen to other stuff too. You turned me on to so many other bands. I remember you getting me into Collective Soul. You're a big champion of Mother Love Bone, I believe. And we also got me into stuff like Counting Crows, which is like a game changer.
Well, Wayhead Records at that point used to put stickers on their CDs that said like R.E.M. meets Bon Jovi, or they'd have like a couple of touchstones and stuff. There'd be mailing companies that would send you lists through the post and describe the albums they got. And there were a few on there where it had said, a few bands that it sort of sounded like, and I'd gone, oh yeah, cool. But at the same time, you saying that, and I appreciate how gracious you are with that. But whilst we were obsessing and sort of going across the country watching rock bands and stuff, you were listening to Mariah Carey.
Of all the ones you can pull out.
Because that was one of the things that kind of, so I don't know if it was because you fancied her or you liked the music or
a little bit.
Yeah. But yeah, it's looking back, those things are quite cool. But also most people these days have got access to tons and tons and tons of music. Back then, even like people were super tribal about stuff. But I was raised, with my mum really liked like Motown and stuff. My dad really liked like Queen, and like used to play this guy called Clifford T. Ward, British musician who used to sing sort of really unusual but very, very English stuff. The sheer beauty of cooking a Sunday breakfast and seeing his wife watching the pots and seeing like the sunlight had sort of like washed through the window, and like commenting in his own mind how beautiful it looked, like the scene. And on the spool of the record, it had a picture of the Mad Hatter from Alice in Wonderland. But I always associate that record being on Sunday mornings. And, my parents tore strips off each other when I was a kid, but I didn't grow up unhappy. I was full of imagination, all that kind of stuff. But I'd always associate that record going on with sunny Sunday mornings and kind of the smell of bacon filtering up the stairs and like lifting me like some sort of ghost out of a bed, pulling me down the stairs without my feet touching the actual steps.
Like Pepe Le Pew.
You very much, yeah, or like a Bisto kid, but with bacon.
Yeah.
I had quite an eclectic upbringing where music was just great. But back then, tribalism was a thing, but it was always nice to get together as we did. And, with Jay that we worked with for a good time, where music was just music. I remember with Jay, the biggest revelation with Jay was because his partner Joe I worked with, and he said, I got Joe the Hanson album for Christmas, like the first one. I was like, oh, right. He was like, yeah, she really wanted it. I objected to it, but, I got it. And he went silent. I was like, you're right. He was like, it's really good. I was like, what?
Yes.
I was like, what? He was like, it's really good. And I played that album 2 pieces.
Yeah.
And will still bang the drum for Hanson even now.
Oh man, what a band and what a journey they've been on.
I think they're amazing. It's funny you should say that because one of their albums is indeed called The Journey. But they're incredible. And I'd say if I was listing vocal influences and stuff, I'd say like Taylor would definitely be in there. I just think it's godly. And it's still weird seeing them all like with kids now and stuff.
I know.
But I played that album literally to pieces, that first album.
What an example of a band, though, for a career. They've just took it under their own wing and they just do everything themselves now.
Yeah, truly. And
total cottage industry.
But yeah, so those sort of things were coming in all over the place. Jay introduced me to the Bad Loves, who I really loved from Australia.
Wow, forgot all about them. I think like every week we used to get together, you and Jay had a different album. Check out this band, check out this band. It was like overload. But thinking back to it, it was like when I say we'd known each other for a few years and stuff like that. You got to know Jay, then we started songwriting and putting a band together. It was a really weird time to be starting a band, I think, in the mid-90s. I think if we'd have been perhaps 100% on starting, let's say, a melodic rock band, it might not have been incredibly popular, but we might have had something a little more focused. But it just wasn't happening at the time. We were all loving all that alternative pop stuff that was coming out. And I think we wanted to head in like that American power pop vein. But there weren't many other people out there who got that, I don't think.
I think in many ways, sort of, and not meaning it to sound like egotistical and stuff, but we were probably ahead of our time with a lot of things that, apparently the same way as like, Jellyfish were probably 20 years too early. That second album of Jellyfish is like Spilt Milk, is still the album that like people have copied the actual tapes, the studio tapes, and it's still the album that people used to test out brand new studios because they just used every single track that they could. But I think the nice thing for me was none of it was us trying to be anybody.
I guess, yeah. Everything
was coming out naturally, and that felt good. And I remember at one point, I don't know if it was kind of like our stuff or it was the band that followed. I remember looking at stuff for like singers and things, and they'd say on the advert, Muse meets Coldplay. I'd be like, I know exactly how that band's going to sound.
Right.
That always dismayed me because it's always fun to just see what comes out. And, if it's working with somebody with a completely different record collection to me, or that's naturally doing different stuff from me, that's cool because it sounds like both of you but neither of you, I guess. And I don't know, that's always been a draw. But at the same time, I think the stuff that you listen to when you were younger is very much about the big rock star thing, and it seems super. But I don't know if it's the same with you, but whenever I got on a bus with my Walkman on and stuff like that, I was singing it. If I got a mate that was playing guitar, you'd be playing guitar, you'd be on bass. I still think of you being on bass at certain albums. And like now, anyway.
How have you approached the new stuff you're doing with There's No Information? I mean, because that's like, again, is that you just like, let's see what happens? Because it's like real experimental sounding. I love the term horror pop for replicants. Who came up with that?
I think that was me just being a ponce.
But how did that band come about? Because that's like it's like a transatlantic project, right?
It is, yeah. My partner in the band is in Cincinnati. It's a different way of working for one, but he's super talented guy. How did you guys meet? Was it just through online stuff? Like when I drifted away from music, I was doing podcasts for a while.
I mean, you were early on that. When did that Twin Humanities thing start?
We did that for 7 years. There was a burgeoning like UK scene within podcasting at that point where a lot of the big sites were very much sort of towing the line and it all seemed very plastic, but there was lots of good lads that were getting together and just speaking their minds and sort of rallying behind stuff that you'd not heard. And again, like not really a sort of massive twist of lime from the music stuff that I grew up with, but I fancied doing that and roped in a cool gent to do 7 years of podcasts.
Was that based around gaming?
There were two. We did Twin Humanities, which was the Dark Souls game. And then we did Oh the Humanities, which was like music, games, films, books, cakes, whatever we wanted to do really. So that's how I could nerd out on that front. But in the band, like my cohort Ichi was going through every episode at that point and like commenting on them and stuff. It's always nice when someone listens and sort of says thank you or comments on something, because there'll be odd people that work with them or catch up with them later and will use them at work, or whether they're eating or they're playing games at the same time. But he was going through like all of the shows and stuff and was a super nice guy. And I found out that he was a musician and I listened to his own stuff and it was great. I loved sort of the twists and turns, and there was a level of drama in not knowing where he was going with stuff. I remember in particular, like listening to this EP they'd done, and there were certain bits where I'd gone, I'd really like that, but didn't want to be super crass and just go like, oh, I want to do music again. Do you want to? Because he was clearly doing his own stuff, but he broached the idea with me, sent something over. I did something with it, and it was like, oh, I think we might be onto something with this. We then quite quickly worked on the first single. there was a game that was coming out called Death Stranding, and there was a soundtrack that was coming out for it. And I got these lyrics, and I was like, what if we challenged ourselves to put something out at the same time or even the day before, like the official soundtrack? That might be quite a nice way of like getting exposed, but also a fun game to play within ourselves to see if we could get up to that point. So we did something and really liked it. I had my friend Kai, who was the drummer in the Go team. I approached about putting some Japanese in there as well. And Kai was super specific with that, like super specific to the point of going, right, well, this is the English lyric. This is what it would mean in Japan. That wouldn't particularly translate or doesn't go. So here's a nuance on it, or this is a nuance on it. And she literally went through every line we asked her to do and sort of made suggestions and stuff. So if in the song it was like, give me the name of the puppeteer, I need the name of the puppeteer. I think the Japanese translates as who the hell is the puppeteer?
Right.
A next level on. But she was amazing within that. And so we put that out and incredibly proud of it. We just carried on writing, and we both had our own sort of individual life trials amidst that. But within all of those points, it was just like, take your time, do what you need to do. I'm still going to work on stuff. I'll send you things. Having worked in bands where, you know, you sat in living rooms and you wrote and stuff, it was cool waking up to something and then listening to it, and then me just going like, oh my God, I've got something for this. And sort of like running through lyrics and plugging things in. And even on my side of things, I'd go out to cafes and I've got like beautiful, like on near cardstock journal. I managed to get some glitter gel pens, and I'd write in glitter gel pen, like writing in magic on tone. And I'd listen to music and drink coffee and I'd people watching and stuff. And I got like this old netbook, and I'd then type them into the netbook in the cafe. So as much as I got all these colors that fit together, and sometimes I went full mood ring on things where I was like, oh, I'm feeling quite emotional now, write this in purple. But once I got the netbook and I got the kind of the rhythm of going in there, it had like an extra degree of, I don't know, like alliteration that bounced in or different ideas. So that was another sort of step along the way of crafting and stuff. But we ended up like writing at the point where I think we were going to release something. Pandemic hit, and we just kept on writing to the point where I think we've got about like 70 songs. Like I say, my cohort is a tremendously talented guy, and I feel like humbled that he can send me anything and he doesn't feel like he has to sanitize it for, oh, this is the vibe of the band, or this is the parameters that we're doing. And it's like, send it over. I've probably got something that might go for most stuff.
Awesome. What's the plan? Obviously, you got this new single. Congratulations on the numbers, which has just been released. Is it just work a single at a time, or do you think you'll get an EP or an album out at some point?
I think a single at a time is kind of cool. We'll keep writing regardless. It just happens, but it takes a huge amount of focus to get the mix through. But you know, hopefully that's something that we can finesse within, you know, the next year and stuff. But it's a case of rattling cages, and to Twitter I've been adding like management and blogs, and to get people to listen to it and maybe sort of glom onto it and stuff. You know, I'm really excited about. But after the time the world's had and the time that individually we've had, and, you know, like especially like personal stuff within the last 6 months, it feels so great to kind of have a win, if you will, to get that out there. And like I say, I'm honored to work with the guy that I work with, because I just think he's a good human being. He's tremendously talented to the point that he doesn't know how talented he is. And I think that humbleness and that love of music that we've just spoken about as well kind of seals the deal in that regard, because it's a cool thing to be part of. When it's going to sound poncy, but like that level of artistry is at the forefront, that childhood level of awe.
Yeah.
And even within this last year, I've been introduced to so many artists that have just made me go, what?
It's a bit overwhelming sometimes. I've spoke to people about that. There's just so much stuff now, and it's like, holy crap. I want to absorb it all, but there's just not enough time. There's
a guy on Apple Music One called Matt Wilkinson, and he is the most passionate curator of music that I have ever come across. Whenever he starts a show, it feels like it's not somebody that's filling 2 hours worth of time. It feels like they're really excited to share things with you. It's just wonderment. And the interviews that he does with artists are so specific and so passionate, and they get so much out of the artists themselves. They've made me want to find out more about the artists because I get a sense of them as a person.
That's always exciting when it's someone you didn't think you'd be interested in, or I've not heard of this person before. Then by the end of the interview, I'm all in.
Yeah. And, I like to buy stuff still. I don't really rely on streaming that particularly. My favorite thing to listen to I've got an iPod Classic 5.5, which has got like a Wolfsman DAC chip in it, which I believe that Apple only had in for the 5.5, but it was essentially a dirty sound chip. So anything with like synths or guitars or anything like that, it gives it like that.
Yeah.
That's still my preferred choice of listening to stuff. So yeah.
Super. When was the last time you cranked up a Danger album on that iPod?
I don't think I got a Danger album on the iPod, but I did listen to it a few years ago. I go through the sways. I used to work with somebody who got me into K-pop that had me obsessing about productions, and like K-pop particularly at that point was going through almost like an 80s sort of phase. So there were like big synthesizers and like crazy unusual production. It wasn't doing the Western thing of seemingly aiming to the lowest common denominator. It was lots of changes, lots of twists and turns. Ironically, a lot of British songwriters were doing stuff for it as well. There's like genius producers in there and stuff. And I got quite obsessed with certain producers and the artists that they work with and stuff. But then when I started listening to Matt Wilkinson, somehow this level of wonky British electronica really sat with me in a creative way and a degree of fascination. It's almost come around full circle to where I was when I was like 13.
It's awesome, man. I love that you're so still so open-minded with stuff and so excited about new music and experimenting and everything like that. It's great.
I mean, it's part of the journey, I think. I know a lot of people who have lost their passion for music. I'd say it's always been a prominence for me, but it's very creatively fulfilling within this regard. And this year in particular, I had a breakdown in August, which was pretty messy. I lost memory. I had like white noise in my head and stuff, like huge headaches. And part of the way back from that was learning to rethink and having kind of a mind that had become like detached, unstable, if you will. The weirdest thing is, I was raised in a house where it was, can't go to school, I'm not feeling well, I'll take 2 paracetamol and if you're ill, they'll send you home and stuff. But it was amazing for me, having stuck my chin out and bared a lot and taken it on my shoulders, how tiny the domino was. I literally felt like I'd been shattered. I felt timid, didn't understand the things that were going on and had to retrain my mind how to think. And some of that was looking at motivational speakers on YouTube and stuff and trying to build my spirit back. And then realizing that was me trying to run before I could walk. There was a position within that where I dropped a very cheap plastic bottle from the fridge, which shattered. And my brain just went like, oh, and it shouldn't have been a big thing. But I realized that it was going to be incremental steps and incremental victories. And as that went on, I started to realize that everything that happened with my brain not or reacting well to something was all experience, and that I could kind of use those as like learning experiences, so that if something happened which would throw me, I could go, that happened there, and it would sort of steady me, if you will. There was one point where I went out late in the rain at night, and in the center of the city, there's this big neon sign that's been put up on these unused apartments, which says, "To see better days." And as I walked out in the rain, I was like, right, I'm going to film this. So you got like beautiful shimmering cobblestones in the rain and stuff. I was sort of turning the camera up at this point, and the reflection of the lollipop in the crossing seemed like an exclamation mark, even before I turned up to the sign. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. Like on the way back, I was wondering how I was feeling, because I thought that, it felt like I was floating in dark water, that seemed like a level of steadiness within itself. And it brought me back to, have you seen the Nina Conti documentary that's on Prime Video? But there was a line in that where a piece of advice that her mentor gave to her, which was, remove the guardian from the gate of insanity. Let ideas free flow. And then within my writing sessions in the cafes and stuff, a lot of that was, my subconscious pouring out, but just my head going, right, what would be a good word? What would be a different word? And like seeing that my brain was, it felt in many ways that I was seeing colors differently. there was a free flow of information that was going on there, which was not only a learning process, but it was building back. And when I was listening to Matt's show and there was all this sort of really unusual music, that was kind of feeding in through that kind of open cave, if you will. So music became a point of like learning, if you will. It felt like music was there for me and building back and stuff. I don't know. It just felt like this proper connection.
Mate, appreciate you being so honest and seeing that you are on that path to both creatively, but just in yourself getting stronger.
Mental health can still be a difficult thing for people to speak out about and to rationalize within themselves. And, you know, I've had many people around me who've just disappeared, but much of that is learning to steady your perspective, see it almost like an old American TV show and just going like, oh, the new series, they're moving them away from the radio station into a television station that's over the other side of America, and they've got like a different cast around them and stuff. But to let people know that, you know, there are people out there that can help them, to have faith in yourself, to realize that you can't funnel yourself and on like a turnaround into a short space of time, but to celebrate the incremental victories. And you know, it's very rare in the modern day how we grow up and we become this sort of older adult thing, which feels stockier and there are more expectations on you and stuff. But within the perspective, it's very rare that you get the chance to reduce yourself to like your very nucleus, like a child, learn to reprocess and grow. And I feel lucky that I've been working with the person that I have. Like I say, that connection to music has been so crazy strong. It sounds daft within the walk around the city and the city like showing me like different stuff.
Well, signs are there if you're open to seeing them.
There's always a skepticism around that, which is completely understandable. And I always bring that back around to when my mama passed away. Like in her final moments, obviously, like you could say she was dying, she was full of drugs to make that like easier and stuff. But the last thing that she said was, I can see Wilf, he's calling to me, which was my granddad. That's the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. The most childlike aspect of yourself is looking at the world with a degree of wonder. Even recently with a story that surrounds that little bit of film I was on about with the To See Better Days. I was walking another place in the city and I looked up and there was a sign that I'd never seen lit on. And it just said, wait here, I've gone to get help. I walked out sort of late at night on like a big music walk and stuff. And this sign was just like enveloped in shadow again. So it wasn't on. A few days later, I walked past again. I was like, oh, I'll check if it's on. And it was on. I was like, okay. And then I incorporated this into my kind of little musical walk around the city. And the thing that you see as the single cover was literally 2 meters away from there and was found. I did not set that up. That was found. So I saw it and I was like, you know, I take pictures, loads of stuff. So I was like, oh, okay, I'll take this picture. And then I was like, again, it just felt like this is cool. I like this. And if this sounds like the daftest thing in the world, fully understand. I don't mind that at all. But being alive to the magic of the world, especially, you know, within being creative and also the level of rebuilding and stuff, just seemed like the most joyously childhood aspect, but none of it felt like I was trying to coerce myself into it. It was just there, and that's super energizing. And you know, I love the mystery of it, the tenacity of it, and sometimes stumbling upon things that I don't expect, and then just go, "Oh, that's kind of cool."
Nothing better than being curveballed by something and being excited about it.
But also, you know, if there is anybody out there that is struggling with their mental health and stuff, just know that there is a journey back, and to have faith in yourself, to try and get help from people around you, but don't try and compress yourself within the things that you see. You know, there are some people listening to this going like, oh, it was nice when he was talking about music, but then he went a bit bonkers at the end.
Mate.
That's fully fine. But that has kind of fed back into the music, and especially with listening to music that was sort of slightly off kilter as well. Like all of this seems to be folding in with these delicious conundrums of cake. It's like, oh, this is cool.
Mate, thanks for chatting to us and being so open and honest. Great that things are on the up for you. It's been cool to connect. It's going to be 30 years next year.
Yeah, long time, man. But I love you lots, and I'm really proud of the journey that you've had sort of since then. Like, genuinely, even if we've not always sort of had time to talk and stuff, and often good friends can to drift within connecting. But
yeah,
super proud of you within the musical journey. Also, you're an amazing podcast host.
This is definitely a journey.
I think if you've got an aspect for, there's a lot of people in the modern day who aren't curious souls, who don't know how to have like conversations and stuff. And the magic and majesty of the way that we connected as kids, the passion for music that we shared, not just making it, but in sort of being ravenous about finding it. I hear that in the interviews that you do. It was something that I was always mindful of when I did it. I can listen to people like Adam Buxton, who I absolutely adore. I can put the way that you are such a generous and curious and attentive and inquisitive host in with the likes of somebody like that. And again, couldn't be more proud.
Appreciate it, mate. Thank you. Well, we'll have to have that proper coffee hookup at some point. Let's do it in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, 100%.
Thanks again for doing this. It's been awesome.
No, I've really loved it. Thank you for inviting me. On the numbers. Congratulations on the numbers. What was it? Jokes. What was it? Jokes. What was it?
We had the real life coffee catch up earlier this week and it was a lot of fun. Thanks to CoffeeJezus for such a great chat. There was so much more in there, but I think what you heard was a great introduction to this fella. If you want to learn more, then hit up at CoffeeJezus on Twitter. And for something a little different, why not listen to There Is No New Information, who can be found on Twitter and Instagram at No New Info Music. It's not danger, but it's some fun stuff. I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and if you'd like to check out over 150 more chats, then they can be found wherever you listen to podcasts, or dive into stvpod.com, where you'll also see some straight-to-video music, videos and merch. There's also a STV Patreon page too at patreon.com/STVpod, where you can support the show in return for bonus podcasts and exclusive merchandise. There's some cool stuff in the pipeline over the next couple of months, so please jump on board if you can. That is all for today's episode. Hope you've had fun, and I look forward to chatting with you all again soon.